The air, water, earth, and sun awes us. The four awesome forces of nature can provide 1,000 times more energy than we need. You are also awesome. You and me and all Earthkind are the fifth element. We are literally changing the world. Technology is now harnessing nature's awesome power for electricity, heat, and transportation. And the best news is that the clean energy transition can save us money and create a more prosperous, just, beautiful, and sustainable civilization today. Welcome to Awesome Earthkind. It's a pleasure. If you would tell us, please, who you are, where do you live, what kind of work do you do?
All right. My name is Marco Vangelisti. I live in Berkeley, California. And the work I'm doing now after a 20-year career in conventional finance is I teach people how to move to aware and no harm investing.
Outstanding. And you're clearly not originally from Berkeley, California. So where are you from, Marco?
I am from Italy, northern Italy, a town called Bolzano, close to Austria and Switzerland.
And what brought you to the States?
I came with a scholarship to, I'm a mathematician, and so I was brought to the University of California with an exchange program, and I did some research in the economics department.
Outstanding. We like to ask folks if they have, we call them a quantum quote, just a quote to kind of frame people's minds and shift people in a little different direction. Would you have one that you'd care to share, sir?
I have two, depending on the mood of your audience. One is the one I like a lot is by Abraham Lincoln. That was in the second annual meeting of Congress in 1862. And he said, "The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we should save our country."
Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, and the reason why I like that is the disenthrall. I think we are kind of enthralled by ideas that we give for granted that might be counterproductive at this point. And we might explore some of them, especially relating to investing during our conversation, I hope.
I hope so as well. So
now, the other one is about hope, which I typically don't like. But if some of your audience is like looking at the situation worldwide and global warming and coming doom, there is this quote that I like. It said, "Hope is the belief in the plausibility of the possible as opposed to the necessity of the probable." Now, if you think about that, it's probable that we're not going to make it, but it's not inevitable. So it's not necessary, and there is still a plausibility of the possible. And the possible is that we do the great turning and we bring about a society that it can live in balance with nature for the long haul. So that's the second quote I have. So I exceeded my quota of quotes.
Well, hey, let's keep doing that. That's a wonderful thing. Let's keep exceeding possibilities. Well, that's great. And I absolutely agree with you, is that while it is very highly probable the human race will self-destruct and wipe ourselves off the map, there is still the hope. And as long as there's hope, and as long as we believe there is hope, we can accomplish anything. And we're amazing creatures who actually achieve wondrous things, even despite ourselves sometimes. So looking forward to this conversation. All right. We like to start with why. So why did you create Essential Knowledge for Transition?
Well, so as I mentioned, I was a mathematician. I studied economics at Cal, and then I found a job that was quite interesting because it allowed me to use my quantitative skills. I worked for a company at the beginning that was building quantitative models for stock markets and bond markets around the world for the quants in Wall Street. This was in the mid 80s when we didn't have laptops, we didn't have email, we didn't have cell phones, right? We had mainframe computers, and we were developing those quantitative models and then Wall Street was using them to make a lot of money. So that's my start in the career, in my finance career. And fast forward 20 years, and I was part of a team managing $20 billion in emerging markets equities. And we were doing great. Our clients loved us. A lot of our clients were actually endowments and foundations, including environmental foundations. And one of them, I had donated to for their good work, saving the environment and so on. And I remember one day looking at the details of our portfolio and finding out that some of the best performing stocks were Malaysian palm oil companies that had destroyed the habitat of the orangutan and made a lot of money because they received a lot of carbon credit for planting, a monocrop of palm oil plants, after taking down the forest. And so that was, to a certain extent, my moment of awakening, so to speak, that we really need to pay attention to what our investments are doing. And then when I left the finance industry, I realized that all the people that I was talking to that were trying to change society as a whole did not really understand very well how the large systems worked, how the money system worked, how the economic system worked, how the finance system and the investing system worked. So essential knowledge for transition, to make a long story short, was a way to democratize the understanding of the large systems in society that operate a little bit like an operating system of society, and trying to understand how they could be redesigned to be in balance with nature. And so that's your why I started Essential Knowledge for Transition. The transition I'm thinking about is a future where we all can prosper and the ecosystem can do well as we. But in order to get there, we need to get the right knowledge to change the systems that are currently problematic.
So what is this slow money? Sounds funny.
Slow money is a catchy phrase. Again, when I left the finance industry, I thought I would never look at finance again. And then I stumbled upon the work of Woody Tash, and he had just come up with a book called Inquiries into the Nature of Slow Money, Investing as if Farm, Food, and Fertility Mattered. And it was a very provocative book because it basically said, our food system is broken, our financial system is broken, and we can probably fix them both from the ground up if we shift some money away from Wall Street and in our local economy with the ultimate goal of restoring the fertility of the soil. So that's what slow money is a movement and a conversation about what do we do about our food system and about our financial system, and how can we address the problems we see.
Sorry about that. The founding concepts behind underlying slow money, what type of investments do you do, and what are the problems with mainstream investing, you would just say?
Well, the conversation about the problem with mainstream investing is mostly that we don't know what the money is and what it's doing. I mean, if you're asking, obviously your audience is very interested in climate change and what we can do about it. You had guests in the past talking about, supporting entrepreneurs in the new, energy space, and that's great. But the big question is, what is the rest of the money doing? And if you dig a little bit deeper, you find out that our money, our investment dollars, are intrinsically linked with a lot of the problems we see, including global warming. I mean, do you have large banks in your portfolio? Well, they funded fossil fuel projects to the tune of $2 trillion since the signing of the Paris Accord, right? So that's basically what is wrong with traditional investing, is that we don't even know what we own. We don't know what we are participating in the world through our savings, right? We know in a few instances, like a lot of your guests, they're working on funding entrepreneurs working in renewable energy, let's say, you know exactly what the money is. What percentage of your portfolio are you aware of? And if you're not aware of, chances are it's probably doing naughty stuff out there while you sleep. Wow. And so that's basically the key, is to understand what your money is doing out there and making sure that the return you get is not extractive, either of nature or communities or other groups.
Wow, cool. So the forces that are driving interest in aware and no harm investing, and like, how big is this movement?
Depending how you define it, there is clearly a sense, you probably heard about socially responsible investing. It started, I think, probably around 50, 60 years ago with faith institutions that didn't want to have their pension money in firearm companies, alcohol, and tobacco, right? So they were the sin stocks. And so if you look back 50 years, 40 years ago, some people started screening out the bad boys, and the bad boys were defined as, sinful. Then, more criteria came in, like, for example, there are now fossil fuel funds. So you kick out the big, fossil fuel companies. The industry has morphed. Now it's called ESG, which means environmental, social, and governance. But at the end of the day, so to answer your question, of course, there is interest in trying to move our investments or be a little bit conscious about what our investments are doing out there. And the idea of the socially responsible funds and the ESG funds seems to address that need. So it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. My view is that that's just the very first step, and we need to go way beyond that, because at the end of the day, ESG funds are invested in the stocks and the bonds of large multinational corporations that are publicly traded companies. And those companies are designed to meet earnings expectations. And sometimes to do that, they need to cut some corners. And so, it's possible that they might not comply with all the environmental rules, or that they might not, treat the environment right. They might not treat their workers right, and so on. So the way I'm looking at it now is really, we need to become A, aware of what our money is doing, and B, move it to no harm. And this is a new field that is a little bit outside the stock market and the bond market. It's really taking the next step and thinking about investments where you have line of sight, exactly what the money is doing out there. And then you can assess whether it's doing no harm or not. And, I see some interest now. I'm teaching currently a course for financial advisors, and I am getting a really positive response to kind of my connecting the dots between the environment and finance, which is something that people don't do often.
Yeah, so we've done a couple of shows with some folks that are in the ESG space, environmental, social, and governance space, specifically looking at clean energy investments. And I think you're absolutely right. It's an incredibly fast-growing field with more and more people who are concerned about where their money is going, what it's supporting, and that it's supporting things that they really don't believe in when they find out. So that first piece of awareness, I think you're absolutely right on. And the next piece about sort of like the doctor's piece, first, do no harm.
Do no harm.
So at the very least, do no harm. I think that's great. And then you say that beyond that, then beyond becoming aware and then doing no harm, it's looking at positive impact and regenerative. And could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, impact investment is a little bit of a general term. I use it quite specifically to mean an investment where you're 100% aware, so you know where the money is, it's doing no harm, and is trying to address either a social or environmental problem. And impact investing, in my definition, still has a positive risk-adjusted return. So after you adjust for the risk of the enterprise or the investment you're making, you expect your capital back in some return. And not all that is labeled impact investment is impact investment in my definition. Maybe I'll change that to positive in the future, because I've heard of solar projects in Mexico where they displaced the indigenous populations, provide no benefits to the local community, but it's a solar panel installation. It's a big solar array, right? So just because it's a solar project or a wind project doesn't mean necessarily that there's no harm. You really need to see how that is implemented. Now, the last category of investing, I think it's really at the intersection between investments and philanthropy. And those are the really cool projects you want to support, regardless of whether you're going to see your money back. And I would argue that a lot of the startups fall in that regenerative category. Some new technology, let's say, again, in terms of renewable energy and so on. If you're investing in a startup, you need to be prepared to lose all your capital. And so The regenerative investment is basically an aware investment, is doing no harm, is addressing some social and environmental problem, but the risk-adjusted return is probably negative. And I see a lot of these slow money investments, which typically are loan to farmers or to food processors or to restaurants, usually on the early stage, are carry with them significant risk. But people are engaging in those type of investments because they want to see the non-financial benefits that would be brought about by them succeeding, right? But those entrepreneurs succeeding, whether it's your favorite restaurant in town or a farm that can deliver to you good organically grown food and so on. So that's kind of the category of regenerative investing, which is, if you want, a new category of investing right in between philanthropy and investing proper.
So in other words, to balance your investment perspective on those that first become aware of what you're doing, second, look at those that can grow and that can have a positive impact while growing. So for instance, in the other category of looking at some of the negative ones, it used to be that Exxon was the world's best investment, largest corporation in the world, and they lost about 80% of their value because they would not shift from fossil fuels, and their value declined dramatically, as opposed to some of the clean energy companies, which now have taken off, everyone from Tesla to other solar companies that now have some of the largest valuations in the world. So take a look at those types of investments, get out of the negative ones, go into the positive ones that can still give you a positive return, but simultaneously balance that with kind of almost a venture capital or a philanthropy approach, where the venture capitalists understand that most of their money, only few things are going to really take off. The rest of them are going to be kind of nothing, or they'll lose money. And there's some times where, you know what, you want to give your money to charity, and therefore look at those regenerative projects that just have a positive social and feel good piece, and you're not really making money on it, but at least, you're doing the right thing. Is that kind of the balance?
Yeah. And I want to give a practical example. There used to be a food desert in the Bay Area in West Oakland. And now there is a grocery store that I participated in funding called Community Foods Market that opened about a year and a half ago. And what they promise is a 3% dividend 7 years from now if everything goes well, right? So obviously, you're not going to take such level of risk just for the 3% if in case everything goes well. And there's a much larger probability that this thing is not going to fly, right? I mean, a new shop, a new grocery, for 30 years, they haven't had one. The population has been decimated by COVID, both in terms of employment and in terms of health and so on, right? But the reason why I participated in that is because I didn't want to have a food desert in my backyard, right? I live in the Bay Area. We have wonderful restaurants, access to food. And I thought it would be very unfair to have 28,000 people living in West Oakland that don't have access to fresh food. And so the reason why I invested is not because of the 3%, right? And I might lose the capital, but it's because I wanted to solve that particular issue. So what I'm saying is that for people that feel that they are particularly motivated to address a particular issue, and the best way to address that is by supporting a business that is raising capital, that could be a regenerative investment, where they're not that concerned whether the money comes back, because they're really concerned about what the business could solve if it succeeded.
Mm-hmm. Outstanding. So just mentioning risk, let's talk about risk and talk about the stock market and its current untethering from reality and the historical crashes that follow periods like the one we're living through now, and the level of returns that you think people can hope for with their aware and no harm types of investments.
Well, again, those are probably two separate conversations, but one is what's happening with the stock market. How can you have the stock market go up a lot while the economy is cratering, especially last year, right? And the answer to that question is you need to understand the level of manipulation in financial markets, in part due to the liquidity maneuvers of the Federal Reserve. So basically, the Federal Reserve can create money when it buys financial securities. Usually, historically, it has bought treasury bills and treasury bonds, but in 2007, 2008, started buying mortgage-backed securities. And in this last bout of financial turbulence in March of last year during the inception of the pandemic, the Federal Reserve expanded its balance sheet by roughly $3 trillion and intervened in the financial markets by actually purchasing. In this case, actually, they bought corporate bonds, ETFs, and so on. Now, people need to put the numbers in perspective. If you're saying, how big is $3 trillion? And I think the best way to compare $3 trillion with something that is real is to look at farmland in the United States. Think about how much farmland we have, right? I mean, we have a tremendous amount of land. You could buy all for $2.7 trillion. So the Federal Reserve created $3 trillion to intervene in the financial markets, an amount that would be sufficient to buy all farmland in the United States. Do you think that type of purchasing power is distorting the valuations of financial markets? And depending on your answers, then you could not be worried about the stock market, or maybe even thinking that the Federal Reserve now has committed to being there ready to buy as soon as the market goes down, the so-called Fed put, whereby there is no downside risk anymore, and you can be very happy and relaxed about your 401k. Or you can think about the fact that we're no longer tethered to reality, and at a certain point, we'll have to reconcile the economic reality we're living through and the financial reality which seems to exist at this point on a different planet. So that's all I can say. Now, the type of investments I'm looking for, which are aware, no harm, and so on, tend to be investments in real things. And maybe I'll give an example just to make it concrete for your clients. There is a company called C-Note, and what they do is they collect funds from investors online. They did a Reg A Plus offering, and they invested in CDFIs around the country that support women and minority entrepreneurs. So if people are concerned with, the growing wealth gap and how minorities are not treated well and how little wealth they have compared to, let's say, their white brethren, then investing in C-Note is a great way. It pays, 2.7%, something like that, has quarterly liquidity, accessible to everybody, no minimum investment. And through that investment, you're supporting communities that have had difficulty accessing capital around the country. So that's an example. Now, what would happen to C-Note if the stock market goes down 30%? Absolutely nothing. Those CDFIs have been in place, are investing and providing technical assistance to entrepreneurs. And so they're going to do just fine. They don't move with the market. Now, if the market goes down 30%, what's going to happen with Tesla, which is now trading at 1,000 PE? So, I don't know. And the other thing is, nobody can tell you when an adjustment is going to happen in financial markets. If somebody says, there was somebody, Tom Hartman, I think, wrote a book, The Crash of 2016. Well, it didn't happen. So the problem is that it's very hard to call the time, but at least you can look at how out of line the situation is, and then you can draw your own conclusions.
Okay, so first, what's a CDFI?
Oh, CDFI is a community development finance institution.
Thank you very much.
And these are lending institutions supported by the Treasury Department, and they act as banks, but they make loans that would be too risky for banks, typically to people that have been shut out of common credit markets. So there might not be good enough for banks, or banks don't want to take the risk, but CDFIs can do that and also provide technical assistance to help those entrepreneurs succeed.
Outstanding. So on the one hand, you have very tangible, real things that you can invest in that have a significant impact that may not get the same sort of returns, but they're much less risky, much more long-term, and not subject to the market volatility. I have that piece, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is, right now, if you look at the past and you say, okay, look at how the financial markets have done in the last 20 years, they've done very well. Stock market has done really well. Now, if you form your expectations based on that history, I think you will be greatly disappointed. If you think that the stock market will go up, 10, 15% every year from now on, that is a way of setting yourself up for major disappointments. And so what is a fair way for, how do you value usually securities or any investment? Typically, the way it's done is by looking at the future cash flow of that investment, and you discount it back to the present, and you compare that to the current market value. So, if you think about a house, you think you can rent it, and based on the rent, you get a particular income over time. The present value of those discounted cash flows should give you a sense for what the value of the house should be. And in the Bay Area, for example, we are a little bit out of line with the historical relationship between the rental generated by a property and the value of a property, right? So it's the market is expensive. The same thing really has to do with the PE ratio. So how, the discounted cash flow for a stock is, well, the dividends they might pay out down the line, and the dividends are linked to the earnings that they can earn, right? And so if you look at the price to earnings ratio, is a little bit like a reality check. And it's similar to the idea of comparing the income generated by an asset to its price. So the earnings is the ability eventually for a company to pay dividends and therefore generate those cash flows that once they're discounted back to the present day will give you a sense of the value of the stock. And the price is what the market says is worth right now. So, in the case of Tesla, you would need to wait 1,000 years of earnings to then get your money back on the shares if you buy them today. But of course, I think we're probably now in the greatest fool theory world where you're not so concerned about what a stock will generate in terms of earnings or dividends, but is whether you can sell it to some other schmuck, let's say, later on at a higher price. And so that's where the manias and the bubbles are formed and eventually are, deflated at the right time.
Pop. So I recently, I just saw today actually that there was a transaction for an NFT, which I never even heard of the term, never understood quite what it was, didn't really think about it, but for a virtual house that sold for $500,000. Talk about a disconnect from reality, right? So non-fungible something transactions, is that what those are? NFT?
I do not know because I left the finance industry 11 years ago, and I have not kept up with the craziness of the new terms. I mean, I know what a SPAC is, which is the latest scheme to extract a lot of value out of the economy for a little bit of work. And some people are specializing in that, but
all this disconnect from reality is basically the point, is that there's just all this crazy stuff going on, and actually they take it to the next level of absurdity. Apparently there was a guy who got so upset with the absurdity, he and his friends actually recorded their gaseous sounds for a year and then put that on the web and actually made money selling their sounds on the web, because who knows what it's going to be worth someday, those years worth of gaseous excretions. So crazy, untethered from reality. Absolutely. All right, so let's get back to actually aware and no harm and positive impact and regenerative. And so how do you evaluate your investment opportunities, and what do you suggest that people look at when they're looking to reverse climate change and empower Black and minority community entrepreneurs and do all the good things that we want to do?
Well, the first thing I would say is look at your current investment and make sure that they're not working cross-purpose with what you really care about, right? So that's the first thing, is find out what you own. I think at this point we need to take responsibility for our ownership, take ownership for our agency expressed in the world through our investments. We act in the world through our investments. So the first thing is, if people are concerned about people of color or climate change, the first step is take a close look at your portfolio. I actually like, since most of your clients or your audience will probably have mutual funds, maybe ESG, there's an interesting tool called Invest Your Values that has been created by As You Saw Foundation. And I can provide the link to you if you're interested, and you can put it with the screen notes. And they actually analyze the content of mutual funds according to various lenses: fossil fuel, deforestation-free, weapons-free, prison industrial complex-free, and so on. So basically, you can at least peer a little bit inside your mutual funds and see whether there are companies that are problematic there. So I would say, let's start there. Then, if people want to learn a little bit more about, aware no harm investing, again, they can get in contact with me. I will offer a course called Towards Aware No Harm Investing for individual investors in May. But part of that curriculum is to build a personal investment compass. You might care about different things that I do, right? I mean, some people might care about poverty in the third world. Other people might care about hunger. Other people might care about polar bear. Other people might care about species diversity. So that exercise clarifies a little bit what you care about. And this will provide you guidance along two dimensions. One is what problems you don't want to be participating with your investments, right? So if you're saying, I don't like, climate change, then make sure you don't have fossil fuel companies in your portfolio. But the other side is, what are the positive things you can do with your investments? And it might be a small slice of the portfolio, because frankly, not everybody could do what I've done, which is basically divest from all stock markets and bond markets and just do all direct investing. That's a lot of work. Not everybody can do that. So some people would still have mutual funds, hopefully ESG, but a portion of your portfolio, you can actually start looking at other things. So my personal investment compass is very simple. I look at two things: biophilia, which is the love for everything that is alive, and I look at empathy. And so my question is the investment I'm considering in violation of biophilia or empathy? And if that's the case, I'm not going to look at it. On the positive side, is an investment addressing either biophilia or empathy? So if you want, the investment in community foods market was really an empathic investment, right? I was trying to solve a problem I didn't have personally, but I didn't want people in West Oakland to have, which is lack of access to fresh food, right? And then the next step for me is establish a relationship. So understand who are the people that are running this, whether it's a fund or whether it is a company. In this case, Brahma Mahdi, who's the CEO of Community Foods Market. I've known him for almost 2 decades, and I've been following his work for the last 15. And I invested as soon as it was possible in his venture, and I'm now on the board, for pure transparency. But that's an empathic investment, right? So I establish a relationship, and then eventually I might transact, meaning either invest or buy the stock, whatever it is. On the environmental side and on the biophilia side is all the Slovan investments I made, which is the investments made with the ultimate goal of restoring the fertility of the soil and the life on the land. And so a lot of local farmers and food producers have received, my investments in the last 10 years as a way of supporting that.
Excellent. So most of us have had some down moments in our career, and if you would, in the midst of those down moments, many times we come to some realization about something that needs to change. And could you tell us sort of what your worst career moment was, and what was the story behind it, and what you got out of it, and how it shifted your life?
Wow, actually, the funny thing is that's what I told you first at the very beginning of this interview. I told you my worst career moment, which was when I realized that the portfolio we were managing was investing in things that destroyed the forest in the Borneo and the habitat of the orangutan, while trying to serve our clients, including environmental foundations and even foundations to whom I donated. So that was the worst moment in my career, when I realized what I was doing was completely contrary to my values, and at the end of the day, the values of our clients, except they, of course, were not able to understand that, because they had an investment arm and a program arm. So the money goes out, and it's a group of people doing that, and then the money is grown in their corpus, and that's the task of the investment group, and the two of them don't talk to each other, right? So that was the worst time. And the aha moment for me was understanding the extent to which financial returns can be extractive. The reason why those companies had a tremendous boost in their stock price is because they're taken from nature. They've taken the fertility that was built by nature over centuries and used that to plant palm oil plant, right? So they destroyed a habitat and they benefited economically from it. And they basically took advantage of a common that could have been around for generations and support the orangutan population for generations. And now all of that was gone. So that's basically my aha, is to realize how our investments are shaping the world we live in. And that's basically the aha for me. I think you're mute.
There we go. Outstanding. Thank you, sir. We're going to enter what we call the Pulsar Round. We're going to ask you a series of questions, and we look for your short, succinct, amazing, and mind-blowing answers. Are you ready?
All right. I'll try my best.
All right. Let's see. I'm sure you'll do great. All right. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Don't believe everything you think. Our mind sometimes can play tricks, and to question one's own belief system and conclusion sometimes is very helpful. So I sometimes have a very skeptical approach to what my mind is thinking, making sure that it's not just playing tricks on me. So that's the best advice I got.
So question everything, question authority, even your own mind, and especially your own assumptions. I like it. That's great. All right. If you would share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Well, one of my habits is this part of my meditative practice. I go to the garden and gather my greens, wash them, and then prepare my salad in the morning. So that's my little practice, and seems to be working both in terms of centering and providing good nutrition. So
excellent. All right. An internet resource that you'd recommend for folks.
Well, we are coming to hopefully the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, but during the pandemic, I found great solace in hearing a daily update about COVID from Dr. Campbell in the UK. And he's a very cool doctor that summarizes the latest thing, the latest research on COVID every day in a nice tone and, no hyperboles, but very scientifically minded, and I found that very helpful. So I would certainly recommend that as an internet resource for people.
Outstanding. Thank you. Book that you'd recommend and why?
I really enjoyed recently reading Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Professor Yuval Harari. And it explains why Homo sapiens has become such a powerful force in nature. And the answer to that is because we can make up story and collectively believe in them, whether that is, stock market or money or religion or whatever else. And it's a really fascinating book that I would highly recommend at this point.
Outstanding. If you had a magic wand and can wave it and change one thing for everybody in the world, what would it be?
Oh, that's a piece of cake. I would give the vaccine to everybody in the world right now. And then the pandemic will be over in 3 weeks.
That would be great, huh? Boy,
yeah.
Outstanding. All right. We call this section WTF or F for weather time fudge, an extreme weather event that you live through and tell the tale, because many people are living through them all the time now. Or weather time fun, most fun you've ever had, and the type of weather it was. If you would care to share a story, sir.
Yeah, I think, I used to spend the summer in the mountains in outside Bolzano. And during the summer, you can have some really extreme weather, especially I remember a lightning storm. We were, camping somewhere, and we were hit by this amazing lightning storm. And the interesting thing is, that when the lightning happens, then you count a certain number of seconds, and then you hear the rumble, and from that, the distance. Okay, when you're very close to a bolt of lightning, the sound and the light come at the same time, and they're absolutely explosive. So we were going through that, for the whole night, and rain. And so that was kind of the most extreme event I think that I've experienced personally. I thought we were going to get fried that night, but we survived somehow, although got very wet. And that was August, I think.
Yeah, these extreme weather events are getting more intense, more frequent, and we're just going to see more of them until we both turn and stop creating fossil fuel emissions and regenerate and take the carbon back out of the atmosphere. So, boy, scary. Glad you made it. And those lightning storms are intense, no doubt about it. Okay. How about one unique tip, tool, or tactic that you think people need to know but don't? And maybe it's something you've already said, but or maybe there's something else. So.
I think what a lot of people don't know is how much, again, their investments are affecting their life. And what I see is, when I see, for example, people protesting Monsanto or whatever, and my guess is, maybe I'm sure they probably own that. Now it's called Bayer, but you see what I mean? It's like not understanding that our investments really shape the world we live in. And so if we don't like what we see, then chances are we need to look at our investments, make sure that they're not participating in the problems we would like to see solved.
Okay. What's one thing you're most energized about today, Marco?
Most energized about today, it's a beautiful day out there. And as soon as we're done, I'm going to go to my garden and spend some time there. So that's very energizing.
Very, very personal, in the now and right here. Hey, that's great. Fantastic. So if you would share, we call it the grand finale, a piece of parting advice and guidance and the best way for people to get a hold of you.
Well, they can reach me through my website, EK4T, 4 is the number 4, is Essential Knowledge for Transition. And a piece of advice is, if they're curious about learning more about what I've been talking about, get in contact with me. You can email me at info@ek4t.com or check out my website and maybe consider taking my course in May.
Outstanding. Anything that you wanted to cover that we missed, sir?
Well, there is one, if your audience does not know the work of Walter Jehne, they need to take a look at it. I wrote a blog about his work, and has to do with the fact that we're focusing on CO2, but the way to handle the energy imbalance on planet Earth until we complete the carbon rebalancing among the 3 pools, ocean, atmosphere, and ground, which might take maybe 100 years or so, is manage the energy imbalance. And the best way to do that is through the hydrological cycle. So if you're open to it, I will give you the link of my blog on it, and it might put the issue of climate change in a wider and also more hopeful perspective.
Outstanding. Yes, if you would share the links that you mentioned, that would be fantastic. We'll put it in the show notes and we'll make sure we get it out there. And so for you, what's your next step?
My next step is say goodbye to you and head to the garden.
And in terms of careers and activity, just more of what you're doing?
Yeah, what I do is I really enjoy working with both individual investors and financial advisors on exploring this new space of aware no harm investing. So I'll be teaching a course in May and another one for a financial advisor towards the end of the year. And that's what I really enjoy doing right now.
Thanks for joining us today, awesome people. At awesomeearthkind.com, you'll find tips and resources on how to reduce your energy costs and have a positive environmental impact. You can also enter our monthly sweepstakes for a high-efficiency LED light fixture. If you're interested in becoming an Earthkind Energy Consulting Partner, go to awesomeearthkind.com/earn. When you refer us to a commercial building and they decide to go clean and save green with Earthkind Energy's consulting services, your referral will save money and you will earn finder's fees worth thousands of dollars. If you're interested in starting your own clean energy consulting business, sign up to be notified of the Clean Energy Business Partner that we're launching in May. This intensive program will provide you with the tools you need to start your own clean energy consulting business in the fast-growing $7 trillion clean energy sector. Today's podcast was co-sponsored by New Energy Nexus. New Energy Nexus strives to create an abundant world with a 100% clean energy economy for 100% of the population in the shortest time possible. The future of clean energy is 100% for the 100%. Become part of the solution by going to newenergynexus.com. Remember, you are an awesome force of nature and can make a real difference. Take your next step to create the clean energy future we all want and our children need and deserve. Until next time, take care, be well, and energize!